Well, there's the report from my colleague in the far north. Let's go now to the deep south, to Lashkargah in Helmand province. Caroline Wyatt can join us. Caroline, not long to go before the polling stations goes. How has the day gone?
It's difficult to say because it depends on which town and which village you are in. Exactly as Martin Patience was just saying, most people live in the rural parts. We went into Lashkargah, the main provincial capital here in Helmand, and there we did see people voting with enthusiasm, despite the fact that in, I suppose, the hour and a half at the very beginning of the day, just as polls had opened, there were 7 explosions inside or around the city itself. Some of them were makeshift bombs on the roads, which caught one convoy of media from here. There were also other rocket attacks. That didn't seem to deter people. The voters we spoke to at the 2 polling stations we went to, one for men, one for women, were very enthusiastic about casting their vote. They said they were not intimidated by the Taliban. Having said that, though, some did not want their fingers inked. The threat had been to cut fingers off if the Taliban found that people had been to vote. Well, the Afghans found a way around that. Some of them had their cards punched instead, so that they don't have that telltale ink on their finger. A lot of enthusiasm, but it's not clear what the turnout's like. There are conflicting reports on that. The Afghan polling officials say it's not as high as expected. Other officials say in other parts it was and even exceeded it.
So hard then to draw a conclusion as to whether this was a good day for democracy in Helmand.
Certainly in Lashkargah, people were enthusiastic about voting. They were very keen to say they wanted a future free of the Taliban. Most of them were supporters of Hamid Karzai. His poster is the one that you see up in Lashkargah itself most often, with a few of Dr. Abdullah. It's harder to say about outlying districts. There were apparently some problems with ballot papers in Nowzad, but for example in Babaji, which Operation Panther's Claw, the coalition operation that the British were doing here to clear the Taliban out, apparently voting there has gone well. So I think a very mixed picture, probably not an incredibly high turnout, but nonetheless the people we spoke to very keen on voting.
Caroline Wyatt in Lashkargah in Helmand province, thank you. Well, let's come back here to Kabul, to the really centre of the country, of course the administrative part. We're joined here by the Afghan Member of Parliament, Shukriya Badakhsai. Shukriya, you're dressed in the colours of Afghanistan. Can I take it that you're saying this is a good day, however imperfect, for your country?
For sure, for me this is a national day because, again, the Afghan nation, with all these threats, they are trying to practice and use and enjoy democracy, equal rights for men and women, and they are coming to polling station, regardless of what was their threat and what was happened yesterday and today across the country. But still, this nation and these people want to pass successfully the democratic exercise for the country.
Shukriya, both you and I were here at the Zerguna Girls' School 5 years ago when it was an emotional, euphoric moment, the first presidential elections. The queues went right around the block. It seems very different today, very quiet.
We can't compare today Afghanistan with 5 years back. For sure, 5 years ago, we don't have such a number of threats, which is today we had. Today the threat comes from insurgent side, today threat comes from the candidate themselves side, and today threat comes from what was happened. Even today there was lots of attack, and there was a not demonstration, but a kind of rumors for to be a big demonstration, which is 5 years ago. The polling station wasn't that much large like today. This is why maybe people want to go to the nearest polling station rather than coming and crossing a long way of their home. But still, I'm not saying that the same excitement people are having on their heart for today's election, but I just want to say for the rest of the world, look at the nation with all these threats. They comes out from their home and they want to pass that exam successfully. Whatever is the result of election, I really don't want to talk about it, but what was important for me today, again, we stand for the values which is we want to build for our country. This is democracy, and this is why people comes out from their own home. And with such a circumstances, extremely hard to believe that because lots of attacks, because of lots of other rumors, people may keeping concerned, but see young girls, boys, they're coming and they're using their own vote. So this is, I think I'm very excited about it, but for sure it's not like 5 years back. Lots of things changed.
It's a new time, but hopefully it's a new future for this country.
Hope so.
Shukriya Badakhsai, Member of Parliament, thank you very much for joining us here as the sun begins to set and the polling stations will start to close soon. Too soon to draw a verdict on these elections. No doubt candidates and their supporters will be jumping in soon after the polls close to give their assessment of this important day. We, of course, will continue to provide special coverage, and if you want more, there's lots more on our website. Lots of analysis and reporting from across the country. bbc.com/news. But for now, from our team in Kabul, I'll say goodbye and hand you back to London.
All right, Lise, thank you very much.
For just the second time ever, the people of Afghanistan have gone to the polls to elect a president. And they've done it in the face of rockets, bombs, bullets and intimidation from Taliban insurgents intent on disrupting the election. It ought to provide a lesson to those of us who take for granted the simple act of casting a ballot in peace. The BBC's World Affairs editor, John Simpson, reports on the day's events from Kabul.
A gun battle on the Kabul rooftops. The Afghan police and army have surrounded a small group of Taliban insurgents who they believe are getting ready to stage an attack. The big security operation in Kabul has been remarkably successful today. The battle ended with the deaths of 2 insurgents. There was a lockdown in Kabul itself and the streets were largely empty. But across the country there were more than 70 attacks and 26 people were killed. Serious, but not the explosion of violence which the Taliban had seemed to threaten. While all this was going on, President Karzai was serenely voting. There's been a lot of dissatisfaction with his lack of achievement and with the growing corruption here. We drove south out of Kabul through the frequent checkpoints, down a road where there's been a lot of violence in the past. But when we stopped at the town of Char Siab, we found it was entirely peaceful. The main trouble and the low turnout affected polling stations much farther to the south. Here, people were showing up in reasonably large numbers. They may not have much time for their politicians, and they're sick of all the corruption, but they still have a strong belief that casting their vote really matters.
Things are quiet here now because it's the heat of the day and people are staying at home and probably won't turn out until later on today. But the security presence is still here and it's been quite impressive. We'd scarcely set up our satellite dish before a detachment of special forces turned up and insisted that we got rid of any pictures we'd taken of them. After that, though, the situation became a lot more friendly.
The local police chief turned up to check us out. There were terrorists everywhere, he said, but here everything was under control. So it seems in the relatively peaceful northern half of the country, but in the troubled south it was a different story. Not that President Karzai, when he spoke to the BBC, agreed.
That was a great day for us. We once again proved as a nation that we can do it, and we did it.
But you must be worried in the south, sir. Some polling stations didn't open at all because of security or because people didn't show up.
It went very, very well.
As the slow business of vote counting starts, it's clear the Taliban haven't been able to derail the election. That's partly the achievement of the British and other foreign troops here. But true success will be judged by the size of the turnout. John Simpson, BBC News, Kabul.
Well, hundreds of thousands of Afghan and international troops were on duty today in an effort to protect the polling stations. But despite those efforts, there was still sporadic violence, and soldiers accompanying the governor of Helmand province as he travelled to the polling station were attacked by a homemade bomb. Our defence correspondent, Caroline Wyatt, was with them.
It's 7 a.m. and the polls have just opened. And we're with the governor of Helmand province, Gulab Mangal, as he goes to vote. Then suddenly, this just outside. A makeshift bomb exploding as a convoy, including other Western journalists, drove past. Soon after, an insurgent rocket landed nearby.
The car!
Just something
That's
exploded out there. We don't know what it is at the moment, but it's the first explosion we've heard this morning, just as the Helmand governor is on his way to the polling station. Moments later, another rocket in the distance, a clear warning from the Taliban for voters to stay at home. That was another explosion. We've been trying to get to a polling station this morning, probably like many people here in Lashkar. The polls opened at 7 o'clock. Between the hour of 7 o'clock and 8 o'clock, there were 6 explosions. There have been another 2 here since. The Governor Gulab Mangal has been out to visit them, but it's not clear how many people are actually going to the polls, how many are too scared. Remarkably, this was the scene just 45 minutes later at one of the main polling stations in Lashkar. Enthusiastic voters keen to send their own message of defiance back to the insurgents. Were you not scared to come because of the explosions here?
No, because it's our day. It's coming just once in for 5 years.
The Taliban threatened to cut off the fingers of those found with indelible ink, showing they've been to the polls. But this woman voter from a nearby village proudly held up one defiant inky finger to the Taliban. She tells me a few rocket attacks won't scare us. We're here to vote for our president and our provincial councillors. Caroline Wyatt, BBC News, Lashkar.